The video game market was worth almost $300 billion last year and may double in value within the next decade. But at the same time, the industry has recently seen massive layoffs and spectacular failures from some of the biggest players on the market. That's why today, much like gamers themselves, we look beyond the giant AAA studios to a place where innovation actually happens. I'm Tomasz Koper, and this is Connected on Taiwan Plus. Going co-op with me on this run into the indie and AA markets are from Warsaw, Paweł Miechowski, a writer and communications and brand partnership expert from 11-Bit Studios. He's worked on such classics as This War of Mine, Frostpunk, and most recently, The Alters. And from Taipei, we have Iain Garner, the CEO of Neon Doctrine, a video game publisher helping smaller developers from Asia bring their games to international audiences. Paweł, let me start with you and let me ask you bluntly, what is going on with the AAA landscape, with AAA studios? Like I mentioned in the introduction, we've recently seen huge layoffs. We've seen some spectacular failures with some of their projects. So what's happening in that segment of the market?
I would go a few years back perhaps and see there was a massive investment going from different funds into the industry as the COVID era brought big spikes in players, in revenue, in income, because basically people were sitting at homes and playing games and all looked super positively despite the quite a bad era that COVID was. But then we are a few years later and nothing seems to be as positive as it used to be. So at least that's the perspective I see in Europe. There was a very solid investment in small teams with a promise to make them AA or even bigger teams. There's an oversaturation on the market. There's a crowd on market, and simply I say, that's my private saying, a good game is not enough now. The game needs to be either very good or outstanding, because simply there's so many good games. On top of that, the technological revolution of GPUs is already behind us, because each next generation of CPU/GPU doesn't bring any big step up. I mean, when you compare the games from 10 years ago to the current ones, there's no really big difference. Okay, there are some techniques, the frame rate is going higher, but basically a game that looked very good 10 years ago still does look good, and people can buy those games on different discounts. So there's a ton of historical games that are actually very good and available at low prices for players, plus a lot of new titles. All this is leading to a crisis. I call it a bubble, because the industry was, in my opinion, overinvested. In some areas, of course. The availability of tools such as Unreal and Unity is, it never been so easy actually as it is now. So there are different factors leading to the statement that the industry is in crisis and overcrowded. So I think I brutally call it purging. We're going through some kind of purging. So one thing is consolidation, smaller teams. They need publishers for their capability of making buzz, marketing, bringing titles to the market. So they consolidate around the publishers, and those who are, unfortunately, in a weaker financial condition either need layoffs or just closures. So I think we are witnessing exactly that.
Well, Iain, you previously said that not all publishers, even the bigger ones, are struggling. For example, console gamers or console developers seem to be doing somewhat better. Why is that?
I mean, I think some of the console developers are doing better, but I think those are at the very top end. But I think that that is happening on traditional console developers as well. I think what I mentioned previously was that the prestige developers that are kind of creating the Naughty Dogs, for example, that are making the console selling games, are in a very different situation from the rest of us, because their metrics are based on how many units of the platform that they're moving, as well as the actual game themselves. But they're certainly not immune, and we're definitely seeing that. I would say particularly on the Xbox side, we're seeing that those developers that traditionally you would have assumed would be kind of immune to this type of stuff, they are not. Yeah, it's a general period of upheaval. I think in some respects it's a course correction. I think Paweł kind of said everything perfectly with regards to like the overinvestment and just crazy figures on forecast sheets, which have caused irreparable harm. But it's so I think what we're really seeing now is just reality kicking in after what was an anomaly of COVID. Everybody was sitting at home playing games. Even people that didn't play games before were suddenly playing games because they were really, really bored and they had a PC in their house. And now they are not. And in some respects, we actually saw like a dip to below pre-COVID, because when people were able to go outside, they didn't want to play games anymore.
Well, speaking of bringing it back to reality, let's take a look at what the reality is here in Taiwan. We asked Professor Wen Kai Tai from the Department of Computer Science and Information Engineering at the National Taiwan University of Science and Technology about what Taiwan has going for it, despite lacking a AAA developer. Take a look.
那台湾成功的产品其实很多，它只是不是那么 AAA 那主要的关键的成功因素大概就在design，它的design是很好。那产品要成功，其实有两个面向，一个是做你想要做的游戏，那这种就是热情，它不一定有市场。但是真正组了团队，成为一个公司在 operation 的时候，去 run 一个公司的时候，它的角度就不一样。你要做市场要的，然后呢，定位你的产品之后，再去 design 这个 content， 去理解玩家的心态。那他玩这一类的游戏，他怎么去 marketing， 怎么去抓住重点，玩家需要什么，然后去行销做配合。那像这样团队最著名就是刚才您说的赤足他们最近也很红，哇，他们这个营收的状况，他们都可以去度假9个月了我知道。那会有今天的这样的成就，它是基于过去对游戏是非常 serious 在看问题，它不是只有 development， 它完全是 business， 然后是 design， 最后才是去用 technology 去实现的这个过程。
You can watch the full version of that video feature on making games in Taiwan on our YouTube channel and the Taiwan Plus website. Iain, what did Red Candle Games do differently on the business side of things that made it such a success compared at least to other studios in Taiwan?
I think Red Candle was really smart really early on, because they really figured out that there was a hunger for non-traditional Western games. So all of Red Candle games have like got this really East Asian feel to them, or a very specific Taiwanese feel to them, which galvanized the local audience and also intrigued a global audience, because they're very used to playing games with video characters that look like me and that tell stories that are familiar to me. And I think that what we're seeing now is actually that there's a huge amount of interest in stories from all over the world, and that video games, like any medium, are a conduit for those stories. So I think they were one of the very early companies to realize that, and Detention being such a success, not just in Taiwan, but worldwide, really created like the foundation for people to build on.
Paweł, how much do you think that is a part of the success of 11-bit, this kind of Polish DNA and telling local stories rather than just kind of boilerplate, fantasy, science fiction?
Well, this is a very interesting topic because we're making quite a specific experiences, and we like to mingle with morality, ethics, and put some deeper philosophy into something that later on is, let's say, engaging experience or just entertaining ones, but still with a pinch of thought-provoking messaging behind, and such is the alters. So I'd say, going back to this war of mine, yeah, this one's got a very specific Polish or maybe Central Eastern European vibe, because it's about war, and this part of the world has been heavily touched a few times by devastating wars, and we all have war stories in our families, so this one made it very personal. But if you look at Frostpunk, it's actually set in more British background, I'd say, because as much as the story is fictional because the planet gets frozen, it's still about the fall of British Empire in a Victorian age. So it's rather we're trying to create universal stories that could be readable as well in Taiwan, as well in Argentina, as well as in Poland. However, there's a background within the creators community, I think, because your question, I've heard it more than once, and I was thinking what led to the creation of such a strong scene in Poland, being relatively smaller country. You know, we have Germany to the one side, Russia to the other, but still we have a huge game industry comparing to those. And as far as I know, the numbers, only France and Britain has a bigger development scene in Europe. Anyhow, what I meant is that in Polish mentality, there's something like proving that impossible is possible. Jokingly, I would put it like, hold my beer and I'll show you. So it's back to the even 90s when we didn't have any investors' money, but we knew about programming. We were learning how to design. So we were trying to prove that we can do something others cannot. And this is a part of Polish mentality. And this is what we're then putting into our games, to create worlds that no one has created before. And I think this aligns with what Iain said, that this is putting the local, I don't know how to well say it, less flavor or maybe DNA into games, but then the theme of games still needs to be understandable and clear for all the audiences all around the world, because, you know, games is a global market. We distribute globally, we distribute through internet. We need to think globally. It would be hard to make a game for a single market. Maybe United States, maybe China because of the size. Anything else, we just need to, you know, create games for French gamers, German, Taiwanese, Japanese, and Australian. This is how it works.
Well, I'm glad we're going into that direction, because I want to dig into that a little deeper in the next segment of our show. But before we do that, Iain, last word here in this segment. In our previous conversation, you said that AA and kind of that segment of the market tends to have more consistent return on investment than bigger and smaller studios. Why is that? Why the AA segment?
Well, I think because I think the argument I made was that the AA segment is kind of what we call the games industry now. Like, I feel that when we talk about like indie in the classic sense, we're almost talking about hobbyists a lot of the time. There are exceptions to that, but most kind of 1, 2, 3 person teams making their first game are more what I'd call akin to like you know, people making music in their garage. You know, it's an amazing creative endeavor, but the chances of finding great success are quite low. And on the AAA side, it's now just insanely risky. I mean, the amount of money that is going into creating quote unquote AAA games is astronomical. I mean, when I look at some of the budgets that that people have put into AAA games, it would finance every game that I've published and been involved in 10 times over for one game. And that's always a thing I struggle to kind of justify. I think that there is such an astronomical wealth of creativity out there, and that we're kind of pouring so much resources into such singular products, and then those things carry, to an extent, the industry on their back. When they start to wobble, the whole industry has the perception that it's wobbling, when that isn't necessarily the case. Because I like we said earlier, like I see what's happening right now, especially on the AAA side, as a little bit of a course correction. But I actually think like right now there's probably better games coming out more frequently to more players than ever before. Like this is a strange time because the optics look so bad because of the behavior of very wealthy companies, but it isn't necessarily reflective of the quality of the industry, what we're outputting, or really the reality.